In the remote wilderness of the Carpathian Mountains, a village nestled in the shadow of an ancient forest existed in a fragile peace. The villagers lived simple lives, but rumors had long swirled about the forest that no one who entered it returned the same. Tales of strange howls in the night, figures moving under the full moon, and a deep, primordial power that lurked within. For centuries, the villagers avoided the forest. They stayed close to their homes, lit fires at dusk, and prayed to forgotten gods, hoping they would be spared the curse of the werewolves. But deep inside the forest, beyond the reach of sunlight, something was stirring. It began with whispers strange, ethereal voices that drifted on the wind, calling out to those who ventured too close. Then came the disappearances. First, hunters vanished without a trace. Then travelers were found torn apart, their bodies mauled beyond recognition. Fear gripped the village, and the old legends resurfaced. Werewolves were real, and they were awakening. Unknown to the villagers, two ancient werewolf clans had been at war for generations. Bound by blood, they were cursed to fight under the full moon, their savage power unchecked by the humanity they once knew. One clan, the Urzak, believed in embracing the beast within, thriving in chaos and destruction. The other, the Koran, sought a balance, struggling to retain a fragment of their human soul. But now, a new prophecy had emerged, one that foretold the rise of a leader who would unite or destroy them all. This prophecy spoke of a shadow wolf, a werewolf who would possess the strength of both clans, the savagery of the Urzak and the restraint of the Koran, bound by neither and feared by all. The elders of both clans had grown restless, for the signs of the shadow wolf's arrival were manifesting in the moon itself. Its light had grown darker, tinged with crimson on certain nights, casting an eerie glow over the forest. One night, under this blood moon, a young man from the village, Emil, disappeared into the forest. He had heard the whispers, felt the pull of something unknown. His family mourned him, believing him lost, but Emil had not vanished, he had been taken. Deep in the heart of the forest, he awoke, surrounded by wolves both human and beast. They watched him with gleaming eyes, waiting, sensing something within him. Emil was no ordinary villager. Unbeknownst to him, his bloodline was tied to an ancient curse, a secret passed down through generations. His father had hidden it, refusing to tell his son of the horrors that plagued their family. But now, the curse had awoken within him, and Emil was being pulled toward his destiny. The Urzak believed Emil to be the Shadow Wolf, their leader, the one who would lead them in a final war against the Koran and reclaim their full power. But the Koran sought to find him first, to guide him before the darkness consumed him entirely. As Emil wandered deeper into the forest, torn between the primal rage building inside him and the remnants of his humanity, he encountered both clans. Each tried to pull him to their side, one offering power, the other offering salvation. Yet something darker lurked beneath the surface, a force even the werewolves feared, something tied to the ancient forest itself. The blood moon grew stronger, and Emil's transformation began. His body twisted, his bones cracked, and his mind was flooded with visions of battles long past and wars yet to come. Both clans watched in awe and fear, for they knew that once Emil completed the transformation, there would be no turning back. But Emil was not entirely under their control. He harbored secrets of his own, whispers from the forest that spoke of a power beyond the werewolves' understanding, a force that had waited centuries to awaken. And now, with Emil's emergence as the Shadow Wolf, that force had begun to stir. As the moon reached its peak, Emil stood at the crossroads of his fate. Both clans circled him, waiting for his choice, knowing that his decision would seal their future. Would he embrace the chaos of the Urzak or the restraint of the Koran? Or would he become something far more dangerous, a new kind of beast, one that neither clan could control? The forest trembled, and the werewolves' growls echoed in the distance as Emil's eyes gleamed red under the crimson moon. The battle was far from over. The true terror had only just begun, and the forest watched, waiting. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Emil stood there, his body rippling with the transformation, caught between the two forces battling for his soul. The Urzak and the Koran circled him cautiously, knowing that one wrong move could ignite a war unlike any they had seen before. The air crackled with tension, the blood moon casting twisted shadows across the clearing. But it was not the Urzak nor the Korin that Emil feared. It was the strange, ancient presence in the forest, the one that had been whispering to him, calling him long before the werewolves had even discovered him. It was this voice, dark and eternal, that now surged through his veins, making him more than a mere werewolf. He was something new, something that defied both clans. A figure emerged from the shadows, an old woman cloaked in tattered robes, her eyes as black as the deepest parts of the forest. She moved with a silent grace, her steps soundless on the forest floor, yet the weight of her presence was undeniable. The werewolves growled low in their throats, but they did not attack. They knew who she was. The crone, whispered one of the Korin warriors under his breath, his voice trembling with fear. The crone was a legend, an entity as old as the forest itself. Some said she was a witch who had sold her soul to dark gods in exchange for immortality. Others believed she was the spirit of the forest, the guardian of its deepest secrets. No one knew the truth, but all feared her. Emil felt a chill run down his spine as the crone approached him, her black eyes locking onto his. She smiled, but it was a smile devoid of warmth, filled only with knowledge of things too dark to comprehend. Child of both worlds, she rasped, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. You stand on the edge of fate. The blood of the beast flows in you. But you are more than the clans can see. You belong to the forest now. And it to you. The Urzak leader, a massive werewolf with silver streaks in his fur, stepped forward, his voice full of defiance. He is ours to command, crone. He is the Shadow Wolf. The prophecy is not what you think. Fool. The crone interrupted, her voice cold and cutting. You seek to use him for your petty war, but he is beyond your control. The forest has its own plans for him. The Korin leader, a tall, stern woman with sharp, golden eyes, stepped forward, her expression unreadable. What are you saying, witch? What plans? The crone turned her gaze toward the Korin, a bitter smile twisting her lips. There is a darkness in these woods, older than the clans, older than your kind. It has waited centuries for this moment, and now, with the rise of the Shadow Wolf, it will awaken. He is the key, but the door he opens will not lead to salvation. It will lead to ruin. Emil's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the crone's words sinking into him. He could feel the darkness she spoke of, pulsing in the earth beneath his feet, whispering to him in a language he did not yet understand. What does that mean? Emil asked, his voice shaking. What am I? The crone stepped closer, her eyes boring into his soul. You are the harbinger of an ancient force, one that predates the werewolves, predates humanity itself. The clans think they can use you to win their war, but they do not realize that the war is much larger than their feuds. It is the forest that will rise through you, and when it does, the world will tremble. The forest around them seemed to grow darker, the shadows lengthening as if the trees themselves were listening. The werewolves shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking to the crone, to Emil, and back to the blood moon that hung ominously above. The Urzak leader growled, stepping forward. Enough of this. He is ours, crone. You cannot take him from us. The crone's smile widened, showing teeth as sharp as a wolf's. Foolish beast, you are not the only ones who want him. Before anyone could react, the ground beneath Emil trembled. A deep rumble echoed through the forest, and from the shadows, figures began to emerge, humanoid, but twisted, their eyes glowing a sickly green. These creatures were neither wolf nor human, but something in between, ancient and forgotten. The werewolves recoiled in shock and horror. The Firstborn, one of the Korin, whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing din. The Firstborn, ancient guardians of the forest's darkest secrets, had long been thought extinct, mere legends told to scare young pups. But now, they had returned, drawn by the same force that had awakened in Emil. The crone stepped back, her black eyes gleaming with dark amusement. The balance is shifting. The old ways are returning. Choose wisely, Shadow Wolf, for your choice will determine the fate of not only the werewolves but of the world itself. Emil stood frozen, caught between the werewolf clans, the Firstborn, and the ancient darkness that now throbbed beneath his skin. The Urzak and Koran leaders exchanged wary glances, realizing that this battle was far beyond anything they had anticipated. The blood moon pulsed, its crimson light growing ever stronger, as if feeding on the chaos below. And deep in the forest, something stirred, something older than the trees, older than the crone, older than time itself. Emil felt it calling to him, louder now, irresistible. His fate was no longer his own. He had become the key to something far more terrifying. But which door would he open? The forest waited, patient and hungry. Emil's heart raced as he stood at the crossroads of destiny, the weight of the forest's ancient power pressing down on him. The blood moon pulsed overhead, bathing the world in crimson light, and the presence within him grew stronger, darker, pulling him toward a choice that would seal the fate of all. The Urzak and Koran circled, their growls low, their eyes fixed on him, waiting for him to make his move. The twisted Forceborn watched from the shadows, their glowing green eyes unblinking. And the crone, standing just beyond, smiled her cold, knowing smile. "Choose," the crone whispered, her voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "The forest awaits." But Emil felt trapped. Every path before him led to destruction. The Urzak offered raw power and dominance. The Koran offered balance and restraint. But both paths seemed futile against the greater darkness stirring within the forest. He could feel then ancient hunger, awakening, using him as its vessel. Suddenly, the ground beneath him cracked open, and dark tendrils of shadow snaked up from the earth, wrapping around his legs, pulling him downward. Emil gasped, struggling against the pull, but the more he resisted, the tighter the tendrils gripped him. The forest was claiming him. "Stop fighting it," the crone said softly, stepping closer, her black eyes gleaming. "This is your destiny." Emil looked to the werewolf clans, but they stood frozen in fear, unwilling or unable to help. Even the fierce Urzak leader, who had once proclaimed him as their savior, backed away. The Koran leader, who had hoped to guide him, simply watched in horror, powerless to stop what was happening. The forest had made its choice. Emil's skin burned as the tendrils wrapped tighter, their cold touch seeping into his bones. He could feel the darkness inside him, merging with the force beneath the earth. His body began to change not into a werewolf, but into something far worse. His limbs elongated unnaturally, his skin turning an ashen gray. His eyes burned with an unholy light, and his teeth sharpened into fangs far too large for any creature of this world. He wasn't becoming a beast. He was becoming something ancient, something forgotten by time. The Forceborn, who had been watching in silence, suddenly knelt, bowing their heads in reverence. They recognized what he had become. He was not the shadow Wolf, he was something much darker, a harbinger of the forest's wrath, an incarnation of its deepest, most twisted power. Emil screamed, but it was no longer his voice. It was the voice of the forest, a guttural, inhuman sound that echoed through the trees. The crone laughed, her raspy voice filled with dark satisfaction. "You are the forest's vengeance," she said, her eyes gleaming. "The Shadow Wolf was never meant to unite the clans. It was meant to destroy them." The Urzak and Koran leaders realized too late what had happened. They turned to flee, but Emil, no longer human, no longer werewolf, moved with a speed and ferocity that defied reason. His claws tore through the Urzak leader in a single motion, rending him apart as if he were nothing more than paper. The Koran leader tried to summon her warriors, but they were no match for the creature Emil had become. The clearing was soon filled with the sounds of slaughter howls of agony, the tearing of flesh, and the gurgling cries of dying wolves. The blood moon bathed the carnage in crimson light, as if reveling in the destruction below. And then, silence. Emil stood alone in the clearing, surrounded by the broken bodies of both clans. His breath came in ragged gasps, his monstrous form towering over the devastation he had wrought. The crone approached him slowly, her smile still in place. "You have done well, child of the forest," she whispered. "The old ways are returning. The world will tremble beneath the weight of this darkness." But as Emil looked at the destruction, a cold realization settled over him. He had become something far worse than any werewolf. He had become the forest's executioner, a monster without a soul, bound to an ancient force that demanded blood and ruin. There was no turning back now. He had sealed his fate and the fate of the world. The forest, dark and ancient, pulsed with life around him. The blood moon remained, watching, as if it too were a part of this great and terrible plan. Emil's mind, once his own, now belonged to the shadows. The forest whispered to him again, louder this time, its command clear. Asterisk, asterisk, go forth. There is much more to destroy. Asterisk, asterisk, and, as Emil turned and vanished into the depths of the forest, leaving behind the shattered remnants of the werewolf clans, the blood moon shone brighter. The true horror was only just beginning. The forest had awoken, and soon all would fall beneath its darkness. The end.